Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. So let's dive right in, Madeline. I need to hear all about this because this is a brand new feature here on Twitter Spaces that you appear to have access to and I don't. I want to hear all about clipping. Tell me about clipping on Twitter.
Yeah, this whole clipping thing, we've been hearing about something brewing and it's like, what's going on? So I'm going to put a few things in the nest. We'll also have it in the show notes for our podcast listeners. But it first kind of started with Jack Horner over on the Twitter Spaces design team with this tweet saying, and this was last Thursday, it was a week ago, 6 days ago, March 17th, saying clipping soon and a screenshot. And this was from the Twitter Spaces community space where they come together. They love to do it on Thursdays, Suze, while I'm hosting my Twitter Smarter After Chat and Spaces. So I always seem to miss it, but thank goodness they record it. And so what happened was they were talking about it in this room, which I missed. So a little later, I listened to the replay. Also, Matt Navarra tweeted it out and saying that, Twitter plans to be rolling out this clipping tool in the next few days, and it's going to be available for beta testers on iOS initially. So this was March 17th, which was a Thursday. This was all happening in the afternoon. Because I missed that room in Spaces, I listened to the recording and I heard them talk about it. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. I can't wait to try this new feature. And so that evening, I saw there was a room going on with Jon Stewart, and he had on Kara Swisher and all these big name people, and they were talking about clickbait ratings in the mainstream media. And so it really grabbed my attention. And I'm thinking, okay, I see this little new thing while I'm in Spaces, it looked like a retweet icon. And I was playing with it and I realized it was letting me do the clipping feature. Even though they had just announced and said it would probably be in the next few days, I was actually surprised that I was already able to play with it. Now, here's what's interesting, Suze. So when I was listening to Twitter Spaces from their earlier afternoon community gathering and Q&A, what's so interesting is that someone asked towards the end and said, when I'm listening and I'm doing this clipping feature, because the speakers and the listeners, there's that delay, is that going to factor into this? If I just press clipping, is it going to be the real-time talk from the speakers or is it going to be delayed? And I thought, what a brilliant question, because I was curious about that as well. Well, Spaces team said, they kind of were like, I don't think they really thought about that, but they said they would be checking because that was a really good question. So here's what happened. And I have a screenshot that shows when I did this, I tried doing it because you'll see that little retweet icon. And I think that's the wrong icon to use, Suze, because we're going to look at that and go, let me retweet this as a tweet, not realizing, I can kind of get it like they're thinking, because I guess in a way I'm retweeting, but I'm clipping. I really think they should change the symbol a little bit.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be like, I used the scissors icon when I was tweeting about it in the week. So maybe it needs to be scissors or perhaps the clapperboard or something like that. But yeah, I think you're right. Having a look at your screenshot there, it doesn't shout clip at me. It shouts retweet or share. Yeah.
So I was a little confused by that. And I'm thinking, I don't know about that. That just doesn't seem like the right icon. But I did it and it did exactly what Twitter was not sure if it would do. So I was playing with it and I wanted to catch somebody saying something good. And so I tried it and I caught the wrong part. So I started over, let me do that. And so they had the new CEO of Twitter. And I thought, let me get him talking. So I did that. And when I played it back, it was Jon Stewart talking. So it was Jon Stewart asking him the question. So there was the delay. And I was thinking, wow, did Twitter not check that first? I was really surprised that they were not aware of that.
The difference in the streams and the lag has always been something that we've kind of discussed and chatted about, and I've heard the product team talk about before. So it does seem like a bit of something that they've missed if they've not kind of thought that through. Part of my issue with it when clips appeared on Clubhouse was that you can't be specific with it. You literally have to think, this part of the conversation is really interesting. I'm going to hit the clip and hope what they have said in the last 30 seconds is going to catch it. It's not, it doesn't dive straight to those points in the content like I want it to, but I don't know how they would make it do that, to be honest. And I like the idea that they're considering how anyone who is within an audio space can create content from it and therefore share that out and let other people know what it is that they're involved with, what they're hearing and listening to in the space, and potentially let other people know what's going on and that they should join in too, and they should listen to this or listen to the replay or join it live or whatever. I think it is a great idea, but there is just that, as the person hitting the button, there is just that niggle for me that it just doesn't quite capture exactly the essence of what I was trying to capture in pressing the button. And it sounds like, unfortunately, that's what's happened when you've tried it, Madeline.
Yeah, so I was a little disappointed, but hey, they had just launched this. It's in a test only. So have you noticed this button? Do you know if you have access? Because maybe they went back to the drawing board on this, because here's what's interesting. I had the ability to do this for a few days. And now here we are, it's next week. And I thought, you know what? Let me go back and see if they fix that issue. And I went, and here's the thing too. I thought, let me go. It only let me do it in a live room. So I went to a live room this afternoon, and that icon's not there. So I don't know if they're like taking it back, going, let's rework this. Let's get it just right. I don't know. So I would definitely be curious later when we open up the room for Q&A, if anyone here still has the ability to access that. I'm curious, like, who all has access, because they say it's just a small group of beta testers. But look, bottom line is this is going to be a great feature. I'm thrilled that they're going to have a clipping feature. We just want it to work. It's got to work properly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it. There's no sign of it on my app. And I even went to the App Store straight before, as I always do before we start All Things Audio, to make sure I've got the latest version. There was no update for me, and I haven't seen that little icon at all in the lower bar on my app. So as far as I know, I've not had access to it. I've certainly not been able to try it, and that was why I was so eager to hear what you thought of it, Madeline, that you'd actually had the chance to hit the button and use it. But yeah, it doesn't appear to have been rolled out much further than some beta testers, as you say. I think even Kevin Healy in the Twitter Spaces community earlier today was asking who's got this feature, who's got clips then, who's using it, has anybody seen it yet, kind of thing. So it does seem like a kind of clutch of people that have been given access. You were a chosen one. And yeah, perhaps they've done exactly what you've suggested there and been testing it out a little bit and have pulled it back just to tweak it before they roll it out again. But definitely one to watch. As you say, a great little feature, a really good way of creating some content on the move, on the run, hopefully getting more people to discover this great content that's being created on social audio. So yeah, I'm all for it. Can't wait to have a play with it.
I know. So we'll be keeping a watchful eye, and we'll keep you all posted here when we see this working again. And I'll even make a little video walking through how the whole thing works. So super excited. Next up, we have an exciting piece of news, something Susan and I have been talking about for quite some time. We would love to have the ability to do. And it was a tweet that you found from Sajad, I guess from yesterday, saying that Twitter Spaces is working on finally letting us hosts, when we have our co-hosts and speakers, come together before the space actually starts. Suze, what are your thoughts? Because, boy, you've been vocal about this one for quite some time. We both have.
Oh, yes. I have wanted a green room, an area where we can do our setup prior to going live for a while. I certainly have, yeah. Sajad, you don't say what your source is, where you've got the information from, but I'm just happy that it continues the conversation, to be honest, and that if there is this possibility that Spaces are looking at how we can get everybody together in the core of who's going to be hosting the space, get all the tech stuff out the way, make sure all the mics are working, we can all hear each other, all of that kind of thing, before we actually open up to live listeners, then I'm just happy that conversation's still going on. But excited to see that, and yeah, really hoping that that's kind of based in some product manager magic somewhere, hopefully.
Yeah, well, we're waiting very eagerly for this one. And then Alessandro Paluzzi, who's one of those reverse engineers, is coming up with really cool things before they actually happen, just to kind of clue us in on some new things that are being worked on. He has a screenshot showing, we've shown some before of his tweets showing like what Twitter is working on with this new podcast feature that's coming soon. But this brand new screenshot from last week looks so interesting, where they've now added 2 sections to it, shared with you and most shared. So what do you make of this, Suze? Because this is quite interesting. I like this.
Yeah, I mean, this moves it on again. I mean, ever since the announcement that there's going to be something relating to podcasts in Twitter, I think each week we've had a little bit more speculation over what it might be. We've talked about what we'd like it to be. We've featured some great threads and tweets where people have come up with ideas of how well it could work here on Twitter as a podcast tab. We've even had the idea that potentially this isn't something that is really going to be rolled out to the public, and that it is all just very much Twitter having a play about, and it's not ever going to become a thing. I really don't believe that, though. As we've said on previous episodes, I think they've got too much invested in audio in various places at the moment for it to not become anything. But to see these 2 buttons, shared with you and most shared, moves this on a little bit more. So for me, this is where it's that real idea that, I've listened to this fantastic episode of a podcast and I'm going to share this with Madeline because I think she would absolutely love it. And it would be so easy then for you to go to that Shared With You tab and find those podcasts that people have suggested for you and recommended to you. Podcast recommendations is a hashtag that is, highly used on this platform. And this is a way of making it a one-step process in terms of, finding those podcasts and actually getting recommendations from people who know your interests, and have connected with you previously. So I think it's a really cool way of sectioning out the podcast so people can find new things to listen to. And the most shared idea, that was one of the things that I think we'd spoken about. If it was going to kind of appear on a dashboard somewhere, what were the sort of things that Twitter might include for podcasting? I think a most shared is sort of a no-brainer. If lots of people are sharing certain episodes, certain podcasts, then, generally it's great to kind of hear about those things. And I'm assuming those are the ones that would appear under the most shared tab. So really interesting to see it moved on a little bit. Again, no kind of idea as to whether or not this is going to appear anytime soon, but very interested to see they're working on it. And also, this says, Alessandro says in this tweet, that this is for Android. We've had an awful lot of split over platforms and devices and, things coming live for iOS and then months and months later, Android joining. It would be nice to think that if they are going to release something like this, that they could at least get it on a base level for both iOS and Android at once. So it's nice to see that that's being worked on not just on iOS as a priority, to be fair.
Yeah, this is super exciting news. And I'm very intrigued by the shared with you versus the most shared. Makes perfect sense. That's just people, in your community that are, it's very much like on Twitter Blue, there's this top article section when you subscribe to Twitter Blue, where it's showing, is very much like an app from years ago called Nuzzle, where it basically aggregates articles from people you follow that are tweeting about it. And so I'm imagining that's what this most shared going to be versus shared with you. It's like, oh, there's going to be a way for me to, like, if I listen to a podcast, I really like it and I want to share this episode with you, then I can somehow tweet that to you. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. It's so early to know what they mean by all this, but it's exciting to know that they're coming up with some really intriguing ways for us to be able to utilize in sharing of podcasts with our community.
On the other side of that as well, as a podcast creator or podcast host, to be able to share a podcast directly with someone that you want to listen to it, that you want, you'd like them to hear your episode for a particular reason, or you want to highlight your podcast, that's quite an interesting aspect as well. I mean, as you say, it doesn't necessarily give us any more information as to whether or not we'll be listening to these podcasts within Twitter, or where are we going to be sent off to? Is it just, tweets that have got links which will send us out to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. I think ultimately Twitter will be thinking about keeping us on their platform. So that's an interesting link to watch to see how they might do that. But yeah, great news. I'm watching this one avidly. I can't wait for this one to become reality.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think the point is keeping us on the platform and not leaving. And so smart of them bringing podcasts to us on Twitter. You've got some Clubhouse news. We got something to share on Clubhouse. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real kind of quick one, again from Alessandro. It looks as though Clubhouse are working on a dark mode, which, that is the entire piece of news that I have. Morgan, you are in the space as Clubhouse correspondent. If there is more on Clubhouse, I'm sure you will let us know shortly when we open up the mics. But yeah, for now, working on dark mode. I guess, every app's got its dark and light. People have got their preferences. And I don't think I'd even noticed that Clubhouse didn't have a dark mode, to be honest. But Alessandro's spotted it in the reverse engineering magic that they're working on it.
Well, that's good news. I know I'm not a big fan of dark mode, but I know a lot of people love it. So great to know that's something that they're adding to it. You found an interesting tweet about Club Deck. I don't know much about this, so I'd love to hear what this is all about.
Yeah, so Club Deck is actually a third-party app that I have yet to investigate, but I do know that certainly Michael has used it an awful lot, Audio Mentor, who's in our space today, and lots of the other social audio hosts that I've connected with have used Club Deck. They have tweeted out this week that they are updating the app with a major new feature which allows you to record stereo lossless audio of your Clubhouse room. Now, recording social audio rooms has been, that's where we started, Madeline. That's why All Things Audio is as it is, because we started out with a conversation one evening on Twitter Spaces saying to each other, how on earth could we record this? This would be great. How do we do it? And then we decided to have a go. And now, the platforms themselves have obviously got wind of the fact that people want to record it. They want to be able to reuse their audio. And Club Deck is an app that allows you to broadcast both on Clubhouse and on Twitter Spaces. And they've now got this recording feature too, and in quite high quality audio. So, yeah, it's a good addition and a good update for them to have added. They've also enabled a feature that allows you to see the status of the speakers in each room, which is quite nice. And they've got some audio effect features within the app as well. And they've added an audio ducking button. Now, they don't expand on that. And I did try and do a little bit of research on that before I started and couldn't really find much more information. So it might be that maybe Michael can fill us in on it shortly. But I'm assuming that is so that you can duck down any audio that you're playing, like a bed or anything, so that you can speak over it fairly easily without having, it's okay if you've got a roadcaster and you've got faders and things and you're playing things off different channels. But if you haven't, then potentially that's kind of what that's there for. I know Club Deck allows you to play things in from other audio sources, like from YouTube and different things like that. So I'm guessing that audio duck is kind of a one-click wonder in terms of trying to sort out your levels with those kind of elements within your live room. But yeah, Club Deck is definitely one of those that is on my list to investigate. And I've been saying that for a really long time. So I really do need to dive in and see what it's all about. But yeah, interesting to see them making more and more updates.
Yeah, that's really great hearing. And I'm looking on their Twitter account. So it says they're the unofficial Clubhouse app for your desktop. So that's pretty interesting that this is for desktop, right? So it's not even an actual mobile app?
It's desktop based, and kind of gives you everything you need on the bigger screen, if you like, to kind of run your room. So you can see the chat, you can check out people's profiles, all the things that you could do on the app. But rather than having to go from screen to screen, it kind of appears in different columns, a bit like kind of TweetDeck or something like that, where you'd be able to see the spread across your screen. So it kind of just makes things a little bit easier. You're not trying to fiddle about on the app while you're live, all of that kind of thing. It looks ideal. I just haven't had the time to have a look, but I am going to dive in, definitely.
Okay, exciting. We're switching gears. We're going to talk about Green Room from Spotify, because just recently, Suze, you and I were having quite the discussion about this. Like, what happened to them? They had such a great opportunity and they blew it. But you were reading a very interesting article that was definitely worth us sharing today, talking about them doing a rebrand. What are your thoughts on all this? Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. I spotted this one early this morning here in the UK over on Bloomberg. And Spotify has basically announced that it's going to move the Green Room app into the main app and is going to rebrand it as Spotify Live. Now, I think we've always said that Green Room as a standalone app just didn't seem to make a lot of sense, did it? So this sounds like a really good idea to me.
It's a very good idea because that was the thing you and I have talked about before. Like, okay, we understood they bought that Locker Room app and it was a separate app and they kept it separate. And we thought certainly at some point they'll integrate this because this was like, early last year, right? I mean, it was quite a while, or I guess maybe last summer when that came out. Do you remember when that was?
Yeah, it was a bit of a while after we'd started this space here on Space. I remember going from Twitter Spaces over to Green Room because it had switched over from Locker Room and we actually jumped live like from one of our Twitter Spaces over there to try it out, as did an awful lot of people. And it had so much promise and it seemed such an obvious use case for, audio, music, podcasts. Spotify's got all of that. It should have flown. But as a standalone app, I just don't think anybody really understood its direction. And I think there seemed to be a real tension between letting go of the Locker Room audience that it had and moving away from that, or how could they still have content on there for the Locker Room audience but bring in this, what Spotify is known for. And I think they've really seemed to have had, a kind of tug of war with it, if you like. But I do think that bringing it into the main app is a way of seeing whether or not people do want this over on Spotify. Spotify is a different kettle of fish to the other apps that we've seen include social audio. It's not a social media app. It's not LinkedIn. It's not Twitter. It is separate. It is a provider as opposed to kind of a connector. So it will be interesting to see what they do. But I do think they had to take this step of bringing it into the main app, or they just had to kill it. It was one way or the other, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we all know Spotify to be about music and podcasting, or podcasts. So even though Locker Room was geared around sports, having these sports conversations, really when all this happened last year, my thought was, okay, so they're going to bring this built-in audience they already have, but being this big giant for music and podcasts, that they would certainly incorporate that in and have a plan to bring people together to talk about music, even enlist some of the big names in music to host rooms and do things for their fans. And it just became such a letdown that we didn't see any of this come to fruition. And one thing you and I really liked when we first started using Green Room last year was the audio quality. Remember how right from the start, the quality was so impressive. It rivaled here in Spaces when at that time Clubhouse audio was still kind of so-so, wasn't that great. And we thought, okay, well, that's a plus. It has really great crisp audio. The interface was nice. I liked how everything was laid out. Just surprised it just didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, and I do wonder if Amazon launching AMP has pushed them into this, or whether this was a plan. Do you know what I mean? Like AMP has come along. It's really, really pushing the idea that anyone can be a DJ, anyone can be a presenter. You've got the Amazon Music catalogue there that you can select things from. I really expected Spotify to be doing that. They'd already launched the Anchor podcast app where you can pull from the Spotify catalogue, and you can create these modular podcasts whereby you can play a song in full from Spotify, which means you haven't got all of those rights issues, which is exactly what Amazon has done effectively. They're giving you, okay, you've got a limitation on how many songs you can play, but you are actually allowed to play these popular songs that people will have heard of and will know. Whereas if we were to sit here and play something really popular right now, it would be a little bit dodgy in terms of copyright and streaming and things. So it's just really interesting to think about whether or not they've done this as a reaction to how they've seen Amazon, position themselves. They're saying the changes they're not going to take place immediately. They're taking place in the second quarter of the year. It doesn't necessarily say that that's happening in April. That gives us a 3-month window, really, doesn't it? So it's not going to happen straight away. But the fact that they're making the changes does, I just think this is where, if it doesn't make it now, is it going to make it anywhere?
Exactly. It's such a great point. And there's a great tweet from Morgan, who's here. Hopefully he'll share some more insights and come up and speak with us in a little bit. But he has a tweet thread talking about this as well with great insights. And then there's also, you and him had turned your original tweet into quite the thread, having an excellent conversation about this and mentioning about the Creator Fund, because they did mention at the beginning of Green Room last year that they were going to have this Creator Fund, but then we didn't hear much about it after that.
Yeah, that's right. It did everybody was pushing a fund to support those of us that were creating audio content on the new social audio platforms, and Spotify or Green Room were absolutely no different. They offered a Creator Fund. You could apply for it. They said it would go live in 2022, but pretty much after that push of letting people know it was there, it really died a death, and we really didn't hear any more about it. I know it's something that Morgan's kept half an eye on, and he said during this thread this afternoon, that he checked out the link. It's still live if you know where to look for it, but it's kind of not obvious in all the places you might expect it to be. And, he suggests that it's because really Spotify aren't really there for grassroots creators. They're not really there for you and me to jump on there and create something amazing. They've got the celebrities. They want the partnerships. They want the big names. Maybe that's where they're going to be heading. And therefore, kind of the Creator Fund sort of falls by the wayside when it comes to that. They're looking at big partnerships and, the big names that will get people onto the platform and listening to those big names' music and things. We were talking a little bit about, do Creator Funds really work anyway? And what is it that people really need to get moving? And I suggested that actually building a community and having that kind of safe space to share best practice and mentor each other is potentially richer than being given actual money to go ahead and do something, because what you then gain is the skills that you can take and build on and use in the future in lots of different ways. So equally, the conversation went down the road then to say, well, that's also not easy to find, is it? So yeah, really interesting thread, and it was good to have that conversation earlier on Twitter, and I'm sure you've posted it up there in the Nest, I can see, so everyone can follow along. And please do add your comments to it. What do you think about Creator Funds? Are they useful? What would be useful in place of a Creator Fund? Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I see Morgan's here. Thanks
Hi,
for joining us.
The interesting difference between Clubhouse clips and Spaces clips is that Spaces clips are basically code. They're not really made to be shared off platform, but they work best on platform. Obviously, you can link back to the space, whereas Clubhouse clips are a video file. But at the moment, there's no way to share that on Clubhouse itself. So they're designed to go on to Twitter and Instagram.
Ah, super interesting. I've seen that as well, Morgan. You DM'd me about Spotify, and you were saying about how this has been in the pipeline for a while, and although the leak may well have been due to AMP, it is something that they've been planning to pull Green Room into Spotify Live.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll just pin that now. So this was one of the three people who contributed to Ashley Carman's article is fellow Bloomberg reporter Lucas Shaw, who said this in his newsletter in October. So I think it's been a long time coming, and it's possible this made the news yesterday because of Amazon AMP, but I don't think it's a competitive reaction in that sense. So it's obviously, as you said, either Green Room was going to be closed entirely or they were going to eventually integrate it. I was slightly curious about that. You would think that if your plan was to integrate, you might use Green Room as an app to experiment and really hone the product first before you built it into the main app. But as we know, Spotify didn't really do any development work on Green Room since they launched in June. really the only thing they did for the product was to actually remove something, which was when they removed gems from profiles in July. So it's slightly curious, and I'm waiting to see what will happen here. I don't feel like this is necessarily a successful reboot. It's just the next step of something that they probably should have done earlier on. But it's a very similar strategy.
Yeah, I mean, what a great playground they've had, really, in Green Room. That, as you say, they could have made so much more of trying different things out. I wonder why they haven't.
Yeah. I mean, you would like to think that there's some sort of skunkwork engineering team in the background that have been quietly working on version 2. But I would expect some of that work at least to show up in the Green Room app. If you've got that stuff running in a lab somewhere, you might think you would reuse some of it, but we didn't see anything like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see where they will take it next and what they might add into it. As I say, I'd kind of like to see, I don't know, I'm guessing that what they're going to do is, they've got their key podcast hosts and they're going to give them the platform to have live conversations with their listeners and link out to, their podcast episodes and all of that kind of thing. I can kind of understand that's what they do for podcasting. And I sort of feel like, there's a place there for pop stars and celebrities to host their own kind of shows and then play the content into it. The actual content that they've got at their fingertips must be the USP for it, surely. I mean, can you think of any other direction it could go in?
I mean, I can think of some things they could do, but it might be a bit of a struggle. So, yeah, I think you're right in that what we've seen on Green Room is very much Spotify repurposing either Spotify exclusive podcasts or networks they've done deals with. So it's already content that Spotify wants to build something around, and this is just giving it a live aspect. So it feels a bit like, not direct comparison, but Reddit's slightly closer. So Reddit is giving this live-ish feel to their website. So you can now see on Reddit how many members of a community are online right now, or when you comment, you can see how many other people are live in the comments right now. So it's just adding this kind of live aspect to a platform in general, and I feel like this is what Spotify Live will do. So there's that angle as well.
I mean, you also mentioned the Complex Networks partnership as well.
Right. Yeah. So this is another company that we've all got to go and check out now. And I'm not really familiar with the kind of work they do, but it looks like as they sell themselves, they're aimed at a younger millennial and Gen Z audience, and they produce pop culture shows. So it's kind of interesting that Spotify have brought in a production house, in effect, of this exclusive partnership, and they will be making the shows for them. So it might be that we do see some more community aspect there in the sense that if this production studio is finding Gen Z creators who have existing small loyal audiences, they may come across. But I'm still slightly suspicious isn't quite the right word, but I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to get any kind of community side up and running. People will, as I said in the tweet, would come in for the show, but you're not really going to stick around. And I suppose the other interesting thing is how people use Spotify, the main app itself. What mode are you in when you go to Spotify and you're looking to play a playlist or a podcast? And this seems like just one extra option of something to listen to that has a different, slightly more exciting feel, the live feel. And maybe you could put your hand up. But I don't know if you're going to be building relationships or making friendships there. So it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think it's got a different outlook to what we've seen on social audio so far. It's just whether or not they really leverage that. It's interesting to see. I've got complexnetworks.com up on my screen at the moment, and they're part of BuzzFeed, which is very interesting. And they do... So, they're saying they're kind of targeting 18 to 34-year-old male and female audience in the US. And, they are Gen Z and millennials, which if you're advertising, if you're audio advertising at the moment, Spotify is where you head if you want to hit that audience. So it's definitely a fantastic partnership for them. They've definitely got the content that their networks are going to be listening out for. And yeah, interesting to understand that it's part of BuzzFeed, and, you know, understanding the content that BuzzFeed put out and the kind of bite-size news in brief sort of things that fly about from BuzzFeed. How that will impact and show up in audio for Spotify.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah. Going for the Gen Z audience is something, of course, everybody wants to do. And we also know that the Clubhouse are slowly trying to engineer in the background to get ready for 13 plus. So that's one other detail on Green Room, which I don't think we know enough about yet, but reading Ashley Carman's piece, it says that the app will be used as a place where content creators can organize conversations which subscribers can hear in the main app. That sounds to me like the rebranded Green Room app will continue to exist as a separate app. And that's where content will be produced, as it were. That's where you get your live audience together. But people will be listening to it in the main app. What I'd like to know is, do they have a form of hand raising in the main app or not? Or do you need to go to the rebranded Green Room separate app in order to participate? So I don't think we know that yet.
Yeah, that's a good reading between the lines, Morgan. That, I see what you mean.
Yeah, that's interesting. Almost like the difference on Spaces between desktop and mobile. You know, like we can listen on desktop. If we want to participate, we got to be on mobile. So are you thinking like along those lines with Spotify?
Yes, I'm not sure. It might be that the only way to create a room is to go and use the separate app. It might be that the audience can do more than just listen on the main app. They might be able to interact, but we don't know. The other part of that is that a job listing came up for Green Room a couple of weeks ago, which was looking for a web engine. And this was somebody who was going to build out a full web version of the app. So that's a recent hire. And that's interesting to me. This is slight speculation, but the way Spotify Desktop works is it's mostly composed of web view. So it pulls in a lot of things from the web, basically, that look like the native app. It could be that if they duplicate the functionality of the separate app as a web interface, they could pull those components into the main Spotify app. So there is still a chance that we'll see interaction in the main app.
Wow, what a lot to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll definitely be watching this one closely, or continuing to watch this one closely.
Well, quick question for you, Morgan. Oh, go ahead. Quick question. Do you feel like Spotify has dropped the ball for so long with this that too much time has passed and it's going to be really hard for them to really catch up to where Clubhouse and Spaces are at? Because, you know, it seems like the places to go is Clubhouse and Spaces. And what's your thought on that?
So I feel that that's both right, but also I think that maybe Spotify will end up with something that looks quite a bit different. So it could be that they make a success of a live show as something that you would listen to alongside your other listening on Spotify. But I begin to think they're not even thinking about trying to do something like Spaces or Clubhouse, in the sense that we have much more social interaction here and can continue that social interaction after the show ends. So on Spotify, on Clubhouse, you go to the show, but then you go to the social rooms afterwards and you build relationship. And on Spaces, you go to the show and then you continue in the tweet. And I feel like that behavior is not something we're going to see on Spotify. They don't really have any successful attempt at a social product, as you said. So they may well succeed at what they're doing in the long run, but I think it will look quite different. And we may not even want to think of them as similar kinds of things.
Right. That makes perfect sense. That's a great take on it. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.